Stuart Holbrook has spent his life in the world of collectors. As president of Theriault, the world's leader in the auction of antique dolls and figurative art for over 30 years, he's managed the often personal and always wild world of collecting and collectors. His market expertise and knowledge of trends comes to life in The Curious Collector, where he shares his experience and experiences in real-life stories, alongside sage advice on how to build great collections within the happy life of a collector.
Welcome back to The Curious Collector. Stuart Holbrook here with you for episode number 40. It's a milestone, I think, but probably not quite as good as 50, but we'll get there soon, I promise, as I keep dropping new episodes, new conversations, new interviews, and sharing with you my love of collecting and collectors and all the things I'm learning out there in the wilds of the world of dolls in my case, or just the heart of a collector in every case. So I am coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia right now. I'm on one of my epic road trips. This one's going to take me pretty much across the country. I'm headed down to Florida tomorrow. I'll be appearing at another doll club. I know I said my doll talks are over, my lectures, but there was one that I never was able to do last year that I promised them I would fit it in at some point. So I'm heading down there to do that doll talk and also visit with some collectors in Florida, because I actually haven't been down there in about a year, since I think last March. And Florida has become a hotbed of collecting, one of the most important markets out there at this point right now. I wanted to share a couple things about some previous podcasts too, some updated things on there that hopefully, if you haven't listened to them, this will inspire you to go back and give them a listen, because I think they were really good episodes that you'll enjoy. The one that I just did before this was documenting your collection, and it's had really good feedback. I've had a ton of emails from people that said that this was one of the most helpful and inspiring to them to get up from the sofa, stop just looking at the dolls, and actually document everything about them. So I'm hoping it inspired a new movement in this world of collecting, that documentation of what you have is such a vital and important process in this. So please go back and listen. And one of the comments I got pointed me to a website that I think is really great for collectors. Now, I've given 3 different websites that have either apps or programs that you can become a member of, and eases in the documentation of a collecting in a better frame than the old school notebooks or doing it on Excel or Word or something along those lines. I never knew this one, and they sent me this link, and wow, I would say this is the most impressive of all of them. The website is called artworkarchive.com, and it seems pretty reasonably priced in comparison to one of the really robust ones I saw that was like $1,200 a year. This one, I think you can buy in for about $18 a month, which I think is reasonable given how I looked it over. And you can do things like create a virtual museum that you are able to share with others, your collection, either by having it open for anyone to see or making it private where you can invite people to be able to look at your collection and review it in almost like a digital virtual museum format. So a really great suggestion. Thank you, Rod, my buddy in Florida, who sent me the link to this after listening to the podcast, because it's a great one, and I think is probably the pick of the litter as far as all of the applications out there that you can utilize. And to learn about the benefits of these and why I think the documentation of your collection in this format is the best, go back and listen to that podcast. This is not an advertisement for any of these. It is absolutely just suggestions of ones that I have run into that I think would work well for collectors. Also, I wanted to talk about the Susan Wright interview I did a few weeks ago that was 2 or 3 episodes back. I can't remember, because in the meantime, we just last weekend had the auction of our John Wright archives, the personal archives of a lot of their artist proof artwork, #1 editions from their own personal archives. And it was an unbelievable event. If you haven't listened to that episode, please go back, listen to it, and then go into Theriault's archives and take a look at the auction. And I think you will really witness the love of our John Wright in this generation that I think is absolutely proving that his legacy and his creations are going to be lasting through multiple generations in the future. He will be looked upon later in years as Emile Jameau, Marguerite Steiff, Kathy Cruz, all of these great influential doll makers. He will be up there. It was an extraordinary auction. I think 30 pieces went to varying museums in Europe, Asia, and in the U.S., including the record breaker at the auction, the Wizard of Oz set, artist proof with illustrations, that was auctioned and was lot 231. I'll still remember it today, a week later. It actually realized $105,000, which I'm pretty sure might be a record for a 21st century doll in the market today. And that will be going to the Barry Art Museum in Norfolk. So a testament to the love, respect, and workmanship of our John Wright. And I think you'll enjoy going back and listening to that podcast again and then going and viewing the auction later on. But let's get into the conversation today about collecting and community. I have to admit, a confession to you all. I was driving down to Atlanta and I was thinking what I'm going to do for this podcast. And I just couldn't come up with any sort of concept of what I wanted to talk about this week. So I happened to pick up the phone and I was talking to a collector friend of mine that many of you may know, Catherine Peterson. And we were just having a nice conversation as I was driving along. Yes, I am one of those. As I'm driving, I just pick random people to call to pass the miles away. So if you get a call from me while I'm driving, you understand. You help me get through all those miles and those long days on the road. So Catherine Peterson was my pick of that afternoon. And we were talking, and I don't know how we got on the conversation of doll clubs, and we were talking about community. And she told me something that really stuck with me, that I kind of got the inspiration to maybe do a podcast about this. Catherine has moved around the country quite a bit over the years. She grew up in Southern California, went to Northern California, went to Utah, went to North Carolina, and lived in 2 places in South Carolina. And she said something to me that really made a lot of sense and helped me to see that doll clubs or doll communities are more than just a place to go and trade secrets about your dolls or talk about things and show dolls, show and tell and all that. That they really are building community that is really important to a lot of people. And she said this: when I would move to a new place, a new town, the one thing I could count on was there was a doll club. And the thing I could always count on from that doll club is I would build my first and most lasting friendships in each of those places I lived around the country. And it's true. She said, I can trace every single area and all the friends I've made, and they're still friends today. And when I moved there, I didn't know anybody. They were the first friends I could make. And they were lasting. And I really thought that was very beautiful in looking at clubs and community within collecting as far more than just, as I said, trading information or sharing your items. It is about a sense of friendship and bonding, and it can be very helpful in so many different ways. So I thought I would take time today to talk a little bit about collecting community, because it's become quite broad in the ways that communities can be built. And I want to go over a lot of the different ones out there to help you see the benefits within them and how they can absolutely benefit your collecting, but even more importantly, benefit your life. I mean, I've had a lot of personal experience with this because I am dropping into thousands of, let's call it, communities around the world within doll collecting. And that includes last year. My gosh, I took to the road, as you may have listened to the podcast about collecting across America, and my trip across the U.S. last year, speaking to 70 different doll clubs and witnessing firsthand communities that were built around a shared subject, a shared passion, and just the beautiful things I saw. These were people that weren't just coming together once a month or once every 2 months to talk about dolls. They were best of friends. These are people that saw each other every few days, people that became close bonding friends in other activities as well. They travel together. They do a lot of things together. And the Doll Club forms that home, I guess you would call it, where it all originated from and continues to nurture over the years within their hobby and their particular passion. So I witnessed this, and it is a really remarkable and beautiful thing to behold in many cases. And I want to inspire people a little bit more to get out there. It doesn't have to be to the classic local doll club, which we'll talk about in a moment. It can be in many different ways that you can build a sense of community and build a sense of belonging in place that, as I said before, I think is helpful and healthy to you as a human being. So with that, let's discuss some of the different, we'll call them communities out there. I think sort of 7 different community levels or types of communities that collectors can belong to, depending on what it is they collect, depending on where they live, depending on their particular comfort level with socialization. So in that, we start with the one I've already talked about, and that's your local club. So you live in Wichita, Kansas, and you collect dolls. You want to join a club. You've got one there. They are your neighbors. They are right around the corner. And there will be collectors of many different types of things. They're not all going to collect what you collect, but they are going to be close by. There's a sense of proximity to this, and you build a really close-knit community in these local clubs. They work very well. Now, they are, I would say, steeped a lot in the old way, in the old line thinking. There were a lot more local clubs in the past before the internet came along, but they are still prominent, still in existence, and you can live pretty much anywhere other than, let's say, Western North Dakota. I don't know. I'm randomly picking something up. And you can probably find a club, or better yet, you could probably even start one yourself if you could find just a couple of people. So the local clubs, again, they're accessible. They're within reach. They are in person, and that in-person contact is such a great thing to have in collecting. And I saw examples of this when I was doing all these local clubs I was talking to around the country, in that they had a way of developing friendships that people were helping each other. And I remember at one club, I would have to listen to a lot of the opening remarks from the club. They have to go over their minutes and all of these different things. That's where I got to learn the budgets of every club out there in America. And I won't share the secret of which clubs have the most money, but it was really fascinating to hear that typically the president of the club would go over all these things and usually end with talking about one of the members. I remember this one instance that they were talking about this one woman who was alone. She was a member, a doll collector, but she was living alone. She had no family, and she was unfortunately going through cancer treatment. And it was the club members who were driving her to treatments, going grocery shopping for her, being there for her. And I thought this was the greatest aspect of what local clubs can do. It's not only that proximity of shared passion. I guess a lot of people don't go to church like they used to, and this is what churches did for so many people. But now you have clubs as well that can serve almost a purpose in this sense of community and building this community. And that goes a long way, I believe, as well, to the longevity of your collecting, in that being together in this pursuit and being there for each other will help you stay in collecting longer. But we'll talk about that a little bit more as to some of the benefits. Now, after the local club, you could get into another category of what I would term regional clubs. Now, I don't want to confuse this because a large segment of the audience for The Curious Collector are doll collectors, but in other hobbies and other areas, you may not necessarily have local clubs, but you will have regional clubs, especially the case if you're living in an area that is more of a rural region. You're living in, I use North Dakota as another example. It might not make sense to have a local club for certain things, but you could certainly maybe develop a North Dakota club of shell art. I'm randomly picking out something that I have no idea if there are actual clubs for shell art collectors, but I think we were onto something if there isn't. But anyway, so you can have the North Dakota Collectors Club of Shell Art, and maybe they don't meet once a month. Maybe they meet twice a year. And they meet in a central location in North Dakota, and they all come together for these gatherings, and they break bread and talk about their adventures in collecting and share new information, and they work as well. Now I can't get the idea of shell art clubs out of my mind. I don't know where I ever came up with this, but I'm now starting to wonder, are there really shell art clubs out there? Tammy, you're in the studio there. Help me out. Is there such a thing as a shell art club?
Well, you know what? I was looking it up, and indeed there are. There are a lot of them. This is not a joke here.
No way.
There is the Marco Island Shell Club, the British Shell Collectors Club. These are 501c3s dedicated to the study, conservation, and crafting of shells.
Okay, but these are just shells. They're not creating art out of the shells. I guess that's...
yes, they are.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. They often
feature
This is
actually
workshops.
A thing.
Yes. Shell flower art, making them into flowers.
Okay.
Yeah. They have groups that provide education in terms of the study of the animals that used to be in the shells.
Wow.
The San Diego Shell Club and Sarasota Shell Club host annual shows featuring award-winning exhibits.
Okay.
And there are online clubs, a lot of them on Facebook, apparently. One of the online clubs, the name, I love this so much. You're going to love this. The Shellaholics Anonymous.
Okay.
I'm not
I guess.
kidding.
All right.
I'm not
I love
kidding.
it.
And
This is actually a thing.
Yeah.
And I just randomly, why did I randomly pick this? And it turns out there's a whole culture behind shell collecting.
Oh, yeah. In a prior life, you probably were president of one or something.
Oh, great. And the drama killed me.
Oh, my gosh.
I became a shell of my former self.
Oh, dear. We knew that was coming. Yikes.
That was coming, yes. All right. Well, thanks, Tammy. I appreciate the little on-the-spot research right there. And we learned that shell art is a thing.
Anytime.
So regional clubs, they serve a purpose. Now, within doll collecting, we have regions, and local clubs fit within a region, but there's not necessarily a regional club in that same sense. But I don't understand why there aren't within doll collecting. When I look at places like, well, I guess Nebraska is an interesting one because I spoke twice to the Omaha Doll Club. I forget the actual technical name, so we'll just call them the Omaha Doll Club for now, which certainly beats Shellaholics. And so they are the only doll club in the entire state of Nebraska. So I found that really fascinating because there are other metropolitan areas, certainly Lincoln, Scottsbluff out in the western area of Nebraska. So I'm trying to figure out how a regional club might better fit in a certain context with doll clubs, to not be necessarily thinking that local is, especially in rural areas like North Dakota, has to be like a town. It can't be a bigger, wider, spread out region. And I think in a lot of those places, they're used to driving long distances for a loaf of bread. As my old West Virginia friend used to always say, boy, you're a long way from a loaf of bread. You know, I think sensible in that case that the regional clubs have a place and have a purpose. And we should look to that a little bit more in the areas where maybe local clubs have kind of gone into the backwaters, where there are just not enough members in that town to support a local club, is to think more on a broader regional sense of maybe the whole state or maybe the western part of the state. And try not to think it has to be every month, but perhaps having twice a year, 3 times a year meetings. And then, of course, utilizing technology in the aspect of Zoom and coordinating maybe a once a month online Zoom gathering of that regional club. So something kind of interesting to talk about in the future. In the example of UFDC, where there could be some solutions to different areas where they're losing the doll clubs. So then you go on to the third category, and that becomes those national, international clubs. Now, UFDC is an example. United Federation of Doll Clubs is certainly an example of that, but there are literally thousands. And I guess now we know there is one for shell art as well. But one I like to talk about that's really interesting is called the Golden Glow or Golden Glow. This is for collectors of Christmas nostalgia. And I have a friend in this organization. So it's one I happen to kind of know a little bit about and how they do things. Now, they don't really get involved with local clubs. I think you can set up your own local club if you want to, but they're not going to be affiliated to Golden Glow. They do have regional clubs like the Texas Collectors of Christmas Nostalgia that are promoted by Golden Glow, but they are not affiliated with them. They have nothing to do with any sort of bylaws or any sort of regulations or anything, but they're just promoted as another option of regional club that you can join or a local club that you can join that is involving people close by that are as passionate as you. Now, clearly the advantage of the national, international clubs like the Golden Glow or UFDC, both very different. And there's many for stamp collecting, coin collecting. I think there's 2 for coin collecting, actually. And it goes on and on. The advantage is that they reach an international audience and they are able to be very well funded for the education and promotion of that subject. So that obviously offers a lot better outreach to a huge audience across the world than a local doll club can, or a local club, if anything, can. Certainly even more than a regional club. So this national presence and this national identity that is so well funded from collectors everywhere will be the most important club and most important community. The downside, obviously, is that, well, it's not as intimate as the local club. You may not necessarily, on a personal basis, know the executive committee of the international club, where you know everybody in the local club and probably most people in the regional club. And I think UFDC does a fairly decent job in this, in attempting to develop a system in where you have the regions and then you have a regional director who will go to a lot of these doll clubs and help bring them together, which is important from the uniting aspect. So that's where, in the example of UFDC, the main organization is more of the facilitator of uniting regions and local clubs. Other organizations, though, are really fascinating to me, and I've talked about Golden Glow, in that really what they're focused on is obviously the educational aspect and promoting the subject and the goodwill and camaraderie of collecting Christmas memorabilia, but their main purpose serves 2 different functions. One, they do a magazine 6 times a year that shares new research, new articles, and then they do an annual convention that is a must-do convention for any of the collectors of this. People love this convention, and it's held in different cities every year, typically in July or August. And that's pretty much what they are focused on. They are not involved with doing anything, as I said, with local clubs or regional clubs, other than helping to promote if there is one out there. But I see this in a lot of the other collecting categories as well, is that the organization is involved in the education and involved in developing a national convention each year, with a few having actual museums, like the 2 coin collector clubs that are out there, national, international clubs. Each of them actually have a museum. One is going to be moving from New York to Toledo, Ohio. And the second one is called I love this name, I think the Museum of Money. That's in Colorado Springs. And so they are involved in these aspects as well. So those are your national, international clubs, and they have a very, very essential role, I think, in the overall messaging to a larger audience, but it's not going to be as intimate a community necessarily, except for these conventions, which I think is an attempt to bring and develop community, if you will, even though it is on an international scale. So the fourth one, this is the one that is developing faster than anything else out there. As local clubs become maybe perhaps a little bit smaller, a little less appealing, or a little more difficult at times for people, formal online clubs are starting to really take off. And it's happening in a lot of different categories. Now, where you're seeing this is not really in the idea of the Antique Doll Collectors Club or Doll Collectors Online Club. There are some general ones out there where you can have people join an online club that may collect 25 different things. All the collectors within it collect different things. And I think that's great. And that's where it should eventually go to. But right now we're seeing it more about the development of niche categories that are opening up their own online clubs. So you have like Blythe clubs, Barbie clubs, Nancy Ann's Storybook, BJDs. These are different examples, and a lot of them are associated to more contemporary dolls that have a typically younger audience. And so they're very, very adept at developing these online clubs and comfortable with the technology aspect of it. And this is where they like to meet, because a lot of them are working, they are raising families, and it just makes more sense. So this is great, because years ago we didn't have that opportunity, and young people were very much, I think, shut out of the conversation of developing as collectors. And this is why we are seeing a lot more younger collectors coming into the market nowadays, days, especially Gen Z, millennials, because online has given them a home, an opportunity to build a community around something that they do collect. And with that, it is becoming the singular most essential part of the future of communities in doll collecting. Now, I know some of you are out there thinking, I'm just not into that. I like to go meet and make my friends in person. And I get that. I understand. But there are new generations coming out that this is the more comfortable way. So what's interesting is, will it segment the clubs? That is, it's no longer just clubs of collectors, that it is everybody is joining clubs that are specialized in a particular topic. I don't know if I like that. I think it's great on one hand in that you're really zooming in on like-minded people who share the same passion, not just for dolls, but one particular category of doll or anything, a subcategory of any collectible. Or is it better to have more general online doll clubs? This is the ABC Doll Club. We welcome every type of doll collector. You can join us, and these are some of the programs and things that we offer online and that we do. That allows for better education across different genres and for people to learn from each other about the different things they each collect. And I think that was the great hallmark of the local doll club, was that everybody collected different things and they could share different aspects of their collection and educate collectors where you have aha moments. Wow, I really like those too. I think I'll start collecting them. Or you develop a network, and we'll talk about networking and how communities build a network, that people learn about these things you collect and they go out and hunt for you or see something down the line, and it helps you in building a better collection. Where if you're in a club where you all collect the same thing, ultimately you're all competitors for the same thing. If you see a rare piece out there that you all collect, you're going for it on your own. You're not trying to help somebody else with it. So I hope that makes sense in why I see the future. I do understand and know this is the future of clubs, online clubs. But to understand, I think having general online clubs is more beneficial to the collector in the end than what I would call very specialized niche areas. Now, that does not mean you can't have both. The beauty of online clubs is you could join a multitude of them. So you could join the specialized one. Let's take Nancy Ann's Storybooks and be a part of that community, but you can be a part of a general larger doll collectors club that's online as well. So it all works, and it's so easy. The entry point of this is so easy for everyone. If you are comfortable with technology, comfortable with using forums, chat rooms, Zoom, that type of thing, this is great. And these online clubs, they don't even have to be Zoom or digital meetings. You can actually just have them on Facebook and build a private club within Facebook where you all chat daily. And that's a really intriguing part of this as well, in that you don't have to only talk at the meeting. That the reality is your group of, let's say, 20 or 30 people that you put together. And this is not an open public club. This is a private club where you have to, if somebody wants to join, they need to, I don't know, whatever it is you do that you need to join a club, and hopefully not going through a hazing ritual, which I always joke about, but that you have an opportunity here, not just to talk at the meetings. You have an opportunity to talk every day, all the time, back and forth, sharing quick things you read or quick things you found or new adventures in dolls. To show a new doll that you just got, you can quick post it onto the Facebook group or whatever group it is online that you chat daily, and you're having a continuing conversation on a regular basis. You're not just meeting up once a month or once every 2 months. So the formal online clubs, this is the future. Which leads us to the fifth type of community that's developed in our current culture, and that is online groups. Now, don't get confused with online clubs. Online groups are a bit more open. These are groups of a particular subject within collecting that you happen to like, and somebody just forms a group. Typically, a lot of doll collectors, as an example, form these groups on Facebook. There's one I'll talk about that I really love there, that collector Tanya Mady in Ohio has developed that is the Simon and Halbig Collectors Group. I forget the exact name, but you can find it. It's a very active group that really has a strong following, daily posts, it seems, of people sharing different Simon and Halbigs that they have, good conversations on research, talking about different auctions and shows and what people got in that particular genre of Simon and Halbigs. Again, they tend to specialize. Now, there are broader online groups as well on Facebook that might just be antique doll collectors or lovers of antique dolls. There's a number of groups on French fashion dolls, and they have thousands of members in many cases. The entry point on this is really easy because you simply just answer a quick 5-question questionnaire to make sure that you are legitimately a collector, and boom, you're approved and you're in. And then you can interact regularly with people. And this is great because these are typically people across the world. And that is one of the great examples of how technology and collecting have given us an ability we never had in the past. You know, I've had my feet in both worlds in collecting, that 80s and 90s period when you had to kind of go visit people, know people, or meet people in person to really learn from them and talk collecting. But now you can do it online. And everything tended to be very local or regional. Your collecting tended to focus on local and regional. You didn't really know collectors across the country, let alone across the world. Now, there are online groups that have collectors in Germany, Italy, Japan, America, South America, everywhere. And they're all talking. They're all sharing. And this has been fantastic. And again, is the future of how communities are going to be built. These online groups are plentiful. And the great thing for you as a collector is if you don't find a group that you particularly want to be in, start it yourself. It really takes about a half an hour to start a Facebook group and put a nice photo up. Send it out to all the friends that you have that you've friended that are doll collectors and start getting the word out. You'll find that you'll develop a following, and I'll give you some tidbits a little later on and what makes a successful online group and how to really give rich daily updates and comments in a particular subject that you love. On the sixth point, we have a community that a lot of you probably have never really thought about, and that's what I term marketplace communities. And I use this as an example because I see it in my own business. We run large-scale auctions. We used to do them all around the country. Most now are in our gallery, but those auctions actually within themselves develop a community. You have people that will come into certain auctions from all over the world, and they become part of a little set of regular attendees that know each other from the auctions, and they develop friendships that way as well. And so it's really a fascinating thing to watch. And you can see this at doll shows. You can see it at any sort of even online marketplaces where people can develop friendships through them also. So something to not discount too. It's not a classic community in the everyday sense, but it is a community nonetheless. I mean, our annual January gala event we used to have was like a family reunion of hundreds of collectors from around the globe that once a year, this is when they got to come see each other. And so a community was built amidst this one particular auction of regular attendees that became friends through that sale. So the final one, number 7, I don't know what to call this necessarily, but it's just a little tiny group of tight-knit friends who form, it's not a club. It's not anything affiliated with anyone else. It's just a little clique, I guess you could call it, of 5, 6, 7, 8 friends that may live across the country. They've met maybe in this marketplace community I've talked about, or they met online and they started forming a group friendship, and they decided, hey, let's make our own little tiny club where we come together once a month. I know one group of, I think, 7 ladies spread out in California, in the South, in the Northeast that have this little once a month Zoom gathering. And they can only see each other once or twice a year, different events that they go to together. But the rest of the time, once a month, they all go on Zoom together and they talk about their new purchases, what they're collecting now, and some of their travels and their new adventures. And it's just a little socializing time. And they're a once a month coming together tea party. I love that. And I think that is at the root of community right there. It is really a wonderful way to engage with people that are not right around the corner that you can't maybe drive to and have tea with, but you're getting together and you're talking about collecting and you're keeping things fresh. So we have all of these different types of communities now that are out there in the collecting world that you can engage in. But it's important, I think, to talk about each of these and what are the hallmarks of best practices that they each have. So an example, you want to start an online group that I talked about before, or an online club. What would be some of the things you should try to do in order to be successful at it? And I think I've really been studying over the past years all of these different communities, and I've had some takeaways of things, certainly in the local club aspect, because of so many I visited with, that I think are the hallmarks of success in why some are thriving and some not so much. And so maybe I can give you a little bit insight into this, that if you're running a local club or you're starting an online club or you're starting an online group, that might help you to really excel and succeed in this endeavor and make it more fun. So the local clubs I have found succeed the best when the club is very diverse, different age groups, different types of collectors. They are really engaged with content and sharing about their collection and presenting unique programs and unique educational moments at the Doll Club meetings, not just the getting together and going through the minutes, going through the budget, talking about the convention that's coming up or anything that UFDC wants to have broadcast out there, which is important, but doing then something else and not just having tea and talking. So I think having a program is really at the key. And I know most clubs do this, but there are some that don't really do it as much. But then it goes further. A couple of the clubs I love, they were not just having the Doll Club meetings, but those Doll Club meetings, they were talking about adventures, different things they were going to sponsor as a Doll Club. Not fund, but sponsor in the sense of getting everybody to come together and go on little road trips. So they might say, hey, we're going to go on a road trip to this little historic town and walk around together and enjoy it. And so they would have little forays every month or 2 months that you could, as part of the Doll Club, go on with other members of that club that are all friends. So it's really, that's a great, great area that you need to focus on and thinking beyond just the meeting and think beyond what kind of adventures and things can we do together as a club. And the ones who are doing that, they are thriving. They are typically 20 to 30 members, which is, I think, a really critical part of thriving as a club. If you're starting to get down into the lower amounts, 8, 9, 10 members, you can make it if you have clear leadership. You can make it if you have some good collectors in there. But the strength comes in numbers in local clubs, and 20 to 30 and sometimes 40 really makes for robust engagement and a lot of presentation opportunities. And your club is big enough as well that you can tend to attract visiting experts on a particular subject to come talk to your club. And don't think just dolls. Remember, there are many adjunct areas in collecting, especially within doll collecting, that you can have experts in other fields come in and talk about historic quilts or some crossover subject that might relate. Doesn't have to be all about dolls. It could be an expert, as I said, locally, who is a collector of quilts to come in and talk about her collecting and what it is she looks for and how they intersect perhaps in the world of dolls. So the local club as well, I mentioned this already, desperately needs a strong leader. You have to have somebody who's really willing to step up and take the reins in spearheading a lot of this content and engagement and adventures, as I call it, trips out there for the club to do. And so if you don't have good, strong person in leadership, the club is going to be a little bit more fragmented, I would say, and not quite as fun. And typically the best clubs always are going to have one collector who might have a really, really amazing collection. And that really stimulates more new members and a lot of content to be able to discuss, because that collection becomes almost like a living museum for the local doll club to utilize in their own education and just admiration of really rare dolls they may otherwise not be able to see. One example of this, I just yesterday was talking to a collector in the Atlanta area who actually left the doll club. Now, she had been in the club here in Atlanta for many, many years and loved it, but it really lost its energy for her, because when she was a member, she was part of that club when, and I'm bringing up some old names that many of you will recognize that are legends out there, but Paige Thornton and Estelle Johnston and Marilyn Dornbush were all in the club, and they all had fabulous collections and really interesting things to share. Well, eventually they all either died or stopped collecting or moved on. And ultimately she was kind of left there alone, where she felt was alone. And here's the thing. She could have taken that leadership role at that point and been the inspiring thing to those other collectors, but she just really didn't feel that anymore. And she decided to leave the club. And now that club, I don't know what's become of it or who's a member of it, but it's clear that it was at its finest moment when there were, in this case, 3 major collectors that had fabulous collections that everybody could learn from and be inspired by. And it made for a really, really robust club. And when they all went away, it just wasn't the same anymore. And this is why I would say as well, and this is really an important point, I did notice that there were times in certain areas where you would have 2 clubs of 10 to 12 people, not that far of a distance from each other in one town. And the result being that it fragmented those clubs from having a really robust engagement, as I've mentioned before, of 20 to 30 members instead of 10, and having more collections in which to engage with in meetings and talk about. And I think have a much better experience and would probably blossom and grow better from that part than having these 2 smaller ones. So one of the things I really encourage is for some of you that have local clubs that maybe have 10 people and you know there's another club right down the road that has 10 people, why not talk about merging those clubs? I know that some of you say, well, our club has a long history. We were started in 1958 and we don't want to merge with another club and lose that identity. But I think ultimately it may be a price to pay if you can work out details of how to integrate both concepts and both histories into one. I think you'll have a far better long-term standing in enticing new people to come into it and giving them really fun, enriching content to have along the way. Which leads perfectly into the concept of what I've talked about before in regional clubs, that you may be in a situation where you only have 8 to 10 members, but you might start thinking, well, maybe we need to rethink our idea of being local. Maybe instead of being the Bismarck, North Dakota club, we should be the North Dakota club, and start encouraging and bringing in members a little further away by revamping a little bit the meeting schedule, doing some on Zoom, doing some in person, maybe doing them in different parts of the state so you can bring more people in and try to consolidate a little bit more. And I think that's where the success of regional clubs will come into play, is this bit of consolidation and a bit of an opportunity for people living all over a particular rural community or rural area to have a home and have a place to be able to share their passion and love. The success of national and international clubs really is in the concept and the idea of being, I like to call it the mothership. And this is the place that, of course, in dolls, it does very much act as that. But in every collecting category, having that mothership is really important because it is a concise and focused committee messaging of the subject and how to educate people and how to bring collectors together. And that is the most important thing. Keeping it positive. They have to be that mothership of positivity as well in promoting the joy of collecting of that particular subject. As I said, the education, but ultimately in encouraging new collectors coming in. The success of national, international clubs relies on numbers. They need membership. They need members, and they need to have, again, like the local club, they need to have the resources to be able to encourage new members coming in. These national clubs don't need to necessarily rely on the local clubs being the entry point into the national club. There should be very easy entry points for a lot of people who maybe don't want to be in a local club or maybe are on online clubs to have a say, have a part of, and be in the process of voting or whatever it is that is necessary just by being a general member. Because that will be, I think, where the most future memberships will be derived from these national clubs is out of the generalized members who are not interested in a local club or maybe specifically get their community through online clubs. Which leads perfectly into the conversation about online clubs. Online groups is separate. We'll talk about that next. But online clubs are the future, as I've mentioned before. And we talked about the idea of them being a little bit more focused on subcategories, subgenres within one major collecting category. I mentioned an example of Nancy Ann's storybooks as being an online club within doll collecting. So the online clubs are so fascinating that the thing that I think people are missing, a few of them have gotten it and understand this, that are missing is they think that online only is going to cut it in the long term. And I absolutely think that though you have formed a primarily online club and you have regular meetings and regular gatherings together, whether it's on Zoom or some other platform, and you're growing, you have really enthusiastic people behind it, that the long-term success is going to rely on the combination of in-person gatherings. Yes. Wow. Wait, but we're an online club. Why do we need in-person? Because human beings still need to interact with each other in person. I hate to break it to some younger people that think entire interaction can be online, but no, to really thrive, you need to have that personal interaction. So my suggestion for anyone forming an online club is why not have an annual gathering? It doesn't have to be something fancy, formal. It can be simple. You can try to pick a geographic area where it's easy for a lot of the membership to come to. Or better yet, why don't you hold it informally during the national convention? It doesn't have to be sanctioned or part of a convention, though you might be able to arrange that. Who knows? You can just have a hotel room and say at 7 p.m. on one of the off nights of the convention, we're having a little gathering with all of our online club members to mingle and mix and get to see each other. A lot of times you just see a photograph of that person you've been talking to online, and wouldn't it be nice to actually give them a hug and shake hands and break bread in person? And so I think that's how you get an online club to thrive. You have the accessibility and the comfort and the ease of being a club member online with busy lifestyles especially, but you have that once a year coming together that really is kind of the icing on the cake. That's what really cements long-term friendships and long-term community, which segues perfectly into talking about online groups. And as I mentioned before, this is separate from formal online clubs that have, let's call it more membership entry points. Online groups are easier. You just quickly fill out a couple questions and you're in the group. Online groups, the ones that are thriving, I've been analyzing a lot of them over the past couple of years. The ones that are thriving have one particular characteristic. They have, well, let's call it two particular characteristics. One, they have the person that formed it is very, very engaged on a daily basis with that group in the sense that they are monitoring it. They are helping post interesting tidbits of information or sharing photographs or sharing news out there in the world of the subject that they formed this group about. And with that, you're getting a steady flow of interaction, a steady flow of engagement. And that is really, really crucial to keeping that group fresh and engaged. You can have 10,000 members to a group because people can join groups easily. Anybody can get a lot of members to a group. If it has a nice title, it fits into their collecting, and it's something they think they might be interested in. And people can be in thousands of groups. But the ultimate lasting ability of that group is going to be content. And that content has to be coming on a regular basis. And it is up to the administrator, the person in charge of it, to make sure that content, when it's lagging from members of the group, that means that the administrator is not out there encouraging more. And you can do things like games or challenges or something along those lines to get people to post. And that's what keeps them coming back, or they will forget about that group because they're on so many other groups and they're going to only focus and see in their feeds the ones that regularly have content. You know, I think about this podcast. Tammy, the producer, who's there in the studio, she nags me every week. It's hard on my busy schedule a lot of times to do a new podcast, but she's nagging me all the time. And you've got to keep engaging. You've got to keep dropping these episodes, or people will lose their interest and lose their sense of place within your podcast, and you won't have an audience anymore and people won't listen. And so I have to force myself all the time to really try to do weekly or bi-weekly podcasts in order to keep people engaged and keep people part of the conversation. That is an important aspect of community. Community is not there if you're not talking. It's as simple as that. So if you form an online group, which I encourage a lot of you to do, be prepared time-wise to also, let's say, garden that group and make sure it's monitored properly and to oversee a lot of the conversations. So we've summarized a lot of these different communities out there, and we certainly see how communities do benefit ultimately the collecting aspect of what we are passionate about. And yeah, it is important because we are protectors, not just of the objects, but we're protectors of the messaging and protectors of this community that we've built over time. And we want it to thrive and we want it to continue on into new generations. And I think building all of these different communities will facilitate this in a much better manner for the future. But a lot of you may be asking, all right, well, Stuart, how does it benefit me as a collector? How does being a part of a community make my collecting better or give me any sort of bonuses in the process? Maybe I just want to be private. Well, look, let me start by saying this. If you are a very private person and you are not into the socializing of collecting communities, I get that. There are some people that just prefer to be solo, and that is your right. That's your prerogative. Everybody can collect the way they want to, and some I know out there prefer not to be, for varying reasons, part of any type of community. They prefer to collect very, very privately. But there are actual tangible benefits to communities in your collecting, and they will help you build better collections and be a better collector overall. So let me just quickly run through a few of these that I think should be very obvious to a lot of you. And some of them may not be necessarily just related to being a collector or what you're collecting or building a better collection. It may be just about being a better human being and living a better life, living your best life. So the first one is clearly the greatest part of it, going all the way back to Catherine Peterson, talking about how she moved around the country to so many different places. And the one thing she could count on were doll clubs, that she could build friendships in those new towns she was living in. And that is, you create lifelong friendships. And these friendships, they were built on a shared passion, but they developed into something more. It transcended beyond the idea of, well, we're friends because we're both doll collectors. You just became friends. Lifelong friends. And you helped each other through hard times. You cheered for each other during good times. And these friendships are so important to our mental health, to every aspect of life. And what you'll learn in this building of friendships is that you will do it with people that you probably never would have met or connected with otherwise, that are really fascinating people beyond just the collecting. You will meet people with truly intriguing lives, and doll collectors in general are so amazing in the stories that they have to tell and the lives that they've led and the careers and the families they've raised and where they've lived and where they've traveled. And you might never have met that person if it hadn't been for dolls and it hadn't been for a doll community. So for sure, there's no question that the building of lifelong friendships is part of the joy of community within a particular passion. The next thing is the validation of your pursuits and collection are going to be the best coming from a community of like-minded people. You know, I often have said to you that a lot of times collectors, they don't even get validation or admiration for what they have done as a collector within their own household or their own family, let alone the others who are non-collectors. And so having this community is really, really crucial in your receiving what I think you deserve. And I think is a great part of collecting is people admiring your collection genuinely and actually understanding what it is that you're envisioning in the set building of your particular hobby. And so I think validation comes the most from your community. And this is a really, really important part of the joy of collecting and being able to get that from other collectors. And if you're private and you're not part of any sort of group or community, you have no one really reinforcing the idea of the greatness of what you are able to project in your collection. If you've listened to some of my previous podcasts, you've heard me talk about in the one episode, building a brand as a collector and how it's important to you and can benefit you long term in things finding their way to you because you've become branded in a particular category or particular genre of what it is that you collect. Say, I keep using today Nancy Ann's storybook, so we'll keep with that theme. Thank goodness we're off the shell art theme. But Nancy Ann's storybooks, as an example, the community you join can help you and highlight your brand as a collector. It gives you a bit of an audience, an initial stage, and people will know you as such. Oh, she's the Nancy Ann lady in the group. And that word spreads. So this helps your brand as a collector. I can't emphasize enough. Perhaps the most crucial one, my mother, Florence, who just absolutely touts the idea of continuing education in dolls, is at the forefront of the joy of collecting in that your education will be the best served within a community. That is that you can share information, not just you inspiring and teaching others about the things that you have or particularly collect, but the way you can learn from others as well. And this back and forth discussion in a positive light, helping each other research is so great within a community. This is where it excels exponentially in the ability of collectors to reach next level stages of really being knowledgeable about different subjects within the dolls. And it's hard to do that alone. You can go online late at night, read, look around, but not having that back and forth discussion about things. These are great at local doll clubs. I think every doll club should have a 15-minute discussion about a particular subject and particular history in dolls, and they go back and forth and all give their opinions about it. And it could be things that nobody knows the answer to, the why or where or who of a particular doll, and everybody can throw out their conjecture and throw out their ideas of their thoughts behind it. And I think this is really fun. So continuing education is best served coming out of communities. This one I love. Developing networks that can help build your collection over time. I'll give you a couple quick examples. Again, we're talking about Nancy Ann storybooks, and you're in the club and you're the Nancy Ann storybook collector in that club, and you've got a club membership of like 25 people, and you're the only one that collects them. That's fine. That's good. These other collectors, as part of your community, part of your local club, they know you collect these Nancy Anns. Let's say one of them travels to a doll show and nobody else from the club is there. And they know one particular Nancy Ann storybook that you have been searching for years. And lo and behold, there it is on the table. Well, they're one quick phone call away to telling you about this, and you're one quick phone call away from getting that object or them getting it for you. And so I think this is another positive in that this becomes like a network of everybody helping everyone else in a particular area of something that they're looking for, in that community helps to build better collections. Oh, and within this idea of networking in a community, you can actually profit from it as well in a different way. So let's say you saw that Nancy Ann storybook. You know that this is a rare one that your friend Barbara was looking for, and you see it's priced at $30 Well, I know that she told me these are worth $500 to $1,000. Well, that's a point where you can also buy it for that $30 and you can turn around and flip it to Barbara, make a profit on it to use your money towards something you want. There's nothing wrong with that. Barbara's going to be happy. She's probably going to get it for less than she would have finding it from somewhere else down the road if she ever found it. So everybody wins. So you can not only help another collector get an object that they've dreamed of and aspired to, a bucket list piece, but you can help yourself in being able to make a little profit on that and put it in your war chest as something you want as well. Having social networks, having social communities, I am telling you, and this probably we can all agree on, is the most important thing. It makes for happier lives. This is why collecting is such a positive endeavor. It's not just the things you're collecting. It's not just the joy they bring you. It's the social aspect that results, I believe, in a healthier mind and helps you live a longer life. I think collectors live longer lives by average because, especially if they have communities of people who share in this and build friendships from this, it builds joy. Human beings are meant to be social creatures. We are meant to have interaction. And if we don't have that, I think you are losing a lot of the healthy joy of what living a full life is. If you go back and listen to the podcast interview I did with Dr. Shirley Mueller, she did studies on this and finding that collectors in general tend to be happier people because of the social interaction, not so much from the collecting itself, but from the social part of it that comes in meeting so many interesting people around the world in this and developing lifelong friendships with them. In that sense, it also creates an atmosphere of just respecting human beings in general, respecting diversity, because as I mentioned earlier, collectors, even of one genre, are going to come from 1,000 different walks of life. They're going to come from different places, different cultures, have different careers. They're going to have different religions, different political beliefs. All of these things may not match yours, but because of your shared passion, you developed like-minded friendship and you learn to respect people from all walks of life. And I think we all can agree that right now in society, this may be the thing we need the most. So to reach towards the end of this, let's talk about quickly where communities tend to fail, because I've seen clubs that have failed. I've seen clubs that have broken off. I've seen online groups close, online clubs not really take off. So where have they failed? And I think I've identified the key components of where it tends to break down in a community. And the first one is one that everyone's going to immediately identify because they've heard stories about it. Drama. Drama is the killer of a community. And that's why important leadership is always necessary from the idea of managing this and instilling senses of positivity in helping people realize there are going to be differing opinions and differing ways of doing things, but we can find middle ground. Again, another great lesson in life that we need right now in our society today. So drama's a killer. You'll especially see it online because online sort of gives a no filter approach of somebody sitting behind a keyboard or a computer and not being face to face to somebody, which is why I've always given collectors the advice of do not put on social media which you would not feel comfortable saying to a person right next to you in person. Because I think it takes things down into a different level. And remember, how you type things and how you write things can be perceived differently in how you may be projecting or saying them to a person, how it sounds when you're talking to a person. So drama is a really big one that you will see clubs being broken apart by this. And it pains me to see that because it doesn't have to be. So it's really critical in every single community that I've talked about that an idea of positivity and one of respect to everybody is provided, a comfortable and safe place to share your love of a particular collecting genre that you're into. And that leads us to my new ending I'm going to be doing on podcasts that Tammy has insisted on, and it's called Hot Tips. I don't know why, Tammy, why have you decided this is such an important thing?
Well, because there's so many things we don't know. And there's so many things that when you say them, I sit here, I go, well, yeah, of course. Why didn't I think of that? Let's just compile these up and people can run out the door with them and do them.
We're going to do it. This is my second time doing my hot tips. All right. I've got 2 this time. So my hot tips regarding communities and collecting. The first one, be very cautious of groups online where users are anonymous and people can hide their identity. Reddit is the greatest example of this out there. Now, I have not seen a whole lot of antique doll collecting groups in Reddit, but there are other doll groups there. The caution in this is that you are using fictitious made-up screen names, usernames. And so you can just go in there and pretty much somebody can say to you anything they want and you can say anything they want, and there's no checks and balances. I avoid any groups, forums, conversations, anything online that is anonymous. I will only ever do things that people are actually sharing their identity, because I think that's important in having civil conversations and having much better respect for each other in talking about any particular subject. And this extends to really anything, even beyond collecting. So when you are entering in these communities, be very, very cautious about the ones where people are anonymous. All right. And hot tip number 2, you only get from a community what you're willing to give. Lurking in a community in the corners and just watching what other people say and going to doll club but not actively participating or being a part of that, you're just taking from it. You're not giving. And so what you're taking from it will never be as good because you're not giving. You're not developing the network. You're not developing the friendships in the same way. So you've got to go into a community with the idea of, I want to give back to this community. It will make for a far more enriching experience overall. So collecting is kind of, I don't know, like a tree. You have roots, you have branches, you have leaves. It forms almost a community. And as such, they all thrive in harmony together. And that's why I believe ultimately we need to, as collectors, be part of that community. It helps not only you thrive as a collector, but it helps the subject continue on to new generations and thrive in the future.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Curious Collector. The Curious Collector is hosted by Stuart Holbrook and produced by Tammy Theriault. We invite you to follow us on social media and feel free to leave any questions you have for Stuart on Facebook at Stuart Holbrook-Theriault or follow the Theriault Company Facebook page. And you can stay up to date with the latest auctions and events at Theriaults.com. We'll talk to you on the next episode of The Curious Collector.